I've been using an iPhone for the last 16 years and I decided to switch from a top-end iPhone 16 Pro Max to a budget $200 Android phone for a week. And this phone has really surprised me. This is the CMF phone by Nothing. You've probably seen their crazy flagship with the LED glyphs on the back. Well, the CMF line is their super entry-level phone. It does most of the important things that you need a smartphone to do in 2024, but they have had to cut a few corners to get this under that $200 price point. CMF, by the way, stands for Colour, Materials and Finish. It's actually a term that is used in product design for how a product looks, how it feels, and how it behaves. So this video is going to be like half review, half my experience switching from a flagship iPhone to a budget Android. The things I liked, the things I didn't, and the things that were the biggest surprises. But first, let's do a quick rundown of the specs. So this actually first released back in the summer, and I have been wanting to try it out since I first saw it. Design-wise, there's no metal body like we often find on your more premium smartphones. It has a plastic casing, but it does feel good quality. It doesn't feel weak or flimsy. You will find some metal around the camera bump on the back, which does stick out a little bit, but nowhere near as much as my iPhone, which I do appreciate that. You'll notice there's these 4 screws on the back. This isn't some lazy design that they've just left these on show. This phone is actually modular with a few different accessories, and more on that in a moment. On the front, we have a nice big 6.67 inch Super AMOLED display. Around the back, a 50 megapixel Sony rear camera, which is single lens with a 2x crop. And the second lens is not actually a camera, but it's a portrait lens to help get that depth effect when you're taking portrait shots. And we have a 16 megapixel front camera through the display cutout. This has a MediaTek Dimensity 7300 5G processor, which is a bit of a mouthful, an 8-core CPU with 8 gigs of RAM, and it's running Android 14 with this custom skin by Nothing. You get 128 or 256 gigs of internal storage with a micro SD card slot which supports up to 2 terabytes, plenty of space for expansion. And a 5000 mAh battery with up to 23 hours of video playback. Those are the on-paper specs, but switching from a premium top-end 16 Pro Max to the CMF phone, I want to focus on what it's like to actually use this budget phone, both the hardware and the software. As I have used a couple of friends' Android phones in the past, but this is the first phone that I've owned where I get to properly explore the Android experience, and there have been a few surprises. So what do I like? Well, first, it is the design. I actually really like it. It is fun, a bit industrial. It feels nice and solid despite that plastic body. For Nothing, CMF is their budget spin-off brand. There's also a watch and some earbuds in the lineup, and I am a big fan of those. They're fantastic for 60 quid, even if you just want to pair them with an iPhone. I love this bright orange pop of colour. You can get the phone to match, or in black like me, or this minty green. And unlike most phones out there today, you don't have to stick with the colour that you buy, as you can remove and swap out these backplates. If you get bored of the colour you bought or it gets damaged, you can just swap it out and change it up. And maybe I am showing my age a bit here, but I do remember when I was little, those Nokia phones where you could swap out the entire front or back with some pretty funky designs. So it's kind of cool seeing that make a bit of a comeback here. On the phone, they do feel solid, but they're actually surprisingly bendy. And being plastic, you don't have to worry about the shattering if you do drop this on the hard ground like you would with a glass back iPhone. Nothing also has a few accessories that you can screw onto these mount points. They have this card case for keeping a couple of cards or your ID. The backplate holds the wallet in place magnetically with a ring of magnets, but it's a slightly different arrangement to MagSafe, so they're not compatible with each other if you're wondering. The phone has this dial on the back which unscrews, so you can quickly add things like the kickstand for propping the phone up to watch some videos, or this lanyard, which I always appreciate. I am terrified of dropping my phone when I'm out taking photos, so love it. Nothing have also released the schematics for the backplate, so if you want, you can 3D print your own designs and accessories, and there's a whole community on the forums sharing their model files, so if you don't know how to model yourself, you can just use theirs. It's pretty neat. Next, I want to talk about the display. Personally, I like a big display, and this is just slightly smaller than the 6.9 inch 16 Pro Max for comparison. It's 1080 by 2400 pixels, lower pixel per inch, but it still looks very sharp and crisp reading text. I can't really say I notice a difference unless I really look for it. It is 500 nits for brightness in typical use, good enough from what I've found most of the time, although it doesn't get too bright outside here this time of year in the UK, but it has been fine for me. And this screen can go up to 2000 nits for peak brightness for HDR content. Kind of crazy to think how we've got to the point where we can just stick an OLED screen in a phone for less than $200. But even more impressive than that is this display has a 120Hz refresh rate. And I know this is pretty common in Android phones now, at least in the mid and high range, compared to the iPhone where you'll only find their ProMotion display in their Pro phones that are $1,000 or more. That high refresh rate makes the content on screen update twice as fast as the 60Hz you'll get on the standard iPhone 16, which means navigating and just moving around the OS just feels so buttery smooth. So I do like that they didn't take the easy option and skimp out here just because it is a budget phone. Then speaking of performance, I have been pretty impressed by the chip in this phone. Apart from that name, that does need some work. I haven't done anything like crazy to push it, but I imagine if you're buying a phone like this, then you just want something that works every day, that you can browse the web with, check your social media, check your emails, and chat with friends. The 8GB RAM keeps apps in memory when switching between them, and it just handled things pretty fine in my use. I did want to check out some games, but I found that there just doesn't seem to be anywhere near as many like 3D graphic intensive games on Android versus the iPhone. But I downloaded a few casual ones like this block game and Mahjong, and yeah, it was fine running these. Plus, nothing have guaranteed 2 years of major Android updates from release and 3 years of security updates, which is not bad in a sub $200 phone. Battery life has been stellar too. At 5,000 mAh, this has a bigger battery than my 16 Pro Max, and it lasts all day and then some. And this is another thing where I thought they would probably cut back on, but no. The battery life here would be impressive in a phone in a much higher end category than this. Then on the software side, there have been a couple of things that I really wish that we could do on iOS, like running apps in an up and down split like this. We can do this on the iPad side by side, but not on the iPhone for some reason. And it's pretty cool if you ever need to reference some notes or something while you're in another app. And also this pop-up view feature where you can drag an app to the top of the screen and then it minimizes it into this little pop-up window in the corner, which you can quickly tap to enlarge if you ever need to jump back to it. So those are the two things that really stood out to me so far, and I'm sure I'll find more things as I spend even more time with this Android OS. So that's all the good stuff, but what about the things that I don't like? Well, first, it's this fingerprint reader. This has an under-screen scanner for unlocking the phone and authorizing logins, and I don't know if I am just using it wrong, but it just doesn't seem to work that well for me. It did work more reliably when I first set the phone up, and it would only fail a scan every now and then. These under-screen scanners have been in a few higher-end Android phones now, and I was kind of surprised to even see it in a budget phone here. But really, I just feel like they should have stuck it in the power button instead, as whatever they're using here, it just isn't working that well for me. I often just give up and put my pin in instead. So let me know if you have this phone, how's it working for you? Because maybe it's just my sausage fingers. Next is the complete lack of NFC, meaning there's no Google Pay or support for contactless payments. Now, I know a lot of you guys are watching from the US and maybe you've never been here to the UK, but over here, contactless is literally everywhere, to the point where I don't even carry a bank card with me most of the time. In fact, some places like pop-up street food markets are card or contactless only. They won't even accept cash. So that is definitely something that I'd like to see added to a potential CMF phone too, as I do kind of like not having to carry my bank cards. At least they do have that card holder that you can mount to the back. There's also no wireless charging here. Now, I'm guessing that is because of that modular design. If you remove the backplate, then having an open metal coil there is going to be a bit of a safety issue. Instead, your only option is to charge using a wire using the USB-C port at around 33 watts. Now, you guys know that if you've been around on the channel, I love the whole MagSafe ecosystem on the iPhone, especially when it comes to chargers and wireless power banks. So I have missed that aspect compared to the iPhone. But with the modularity here, There is some potential to have a wider ecosystem of attachable accessories, even 3D printing your own at home. And I can live without wireless charging, but maybe they could have offset that with some even faster wired charging instead. Then just sticking on the modular design, it's really only modular on the outside. You can't swap out any of these inside components. Now, I'm not suggesting that we should be able to swap out the chipset or anything like that, as that would add quite a lot of complexity to the design. But at minimum, it would be nice to be able to swap out the battery. Instead, there's a big warning printed on the plastic sheet telling you not to disassemble it. From what I understand, it's not impossible to replace the battery itself, but it's not as simple as just popping out the old one and sticking in a new one. And for someone intentionally buying a budget phone like this, then being able to swap out that battery after a couple of years, I think would be much appreciated. Especially as we're already sacrificing any proper waterproofing with the modular design, as this only has an IP52 rating, making it only splash resistant. Also, don't expect anything amazing from the single speaker down at the bottom. It doesn't sound particularly great. If you do find yourself using it, it sounds a bit tinny, and it is mono only. Now, I want to move on to the things that were the biggest surprises, starting with the cameras, as I was honestly expecting these to be terrible. But even next to the 16 Pro Max shots, it's not easy to immediately tell them apart, see if you can guess which is which. If you said the iPhone is on the left, then you would be correct. Cropping in, you can see the extra detail. Respectively, they have 48 or 50 megapixel sensors, but the iPhone outputs 24 megapixels by default versus 12 on the CMF phone. But in a lot of these shots, I think the CMF does pretty well. They're well balanced, colors look accurate. My only knock is that sometimes it does this weird processing on detailed surfaces like bricks. It almost looks like a video game where the textures haven't loaded yet. But for the most part, I think they look fine. Although you do only get one camera on the back with that portrait lens for helping with the depth effect in portrait mode. There's no telephoto or ultra wide here, which has become a lot more popular in recent years. Video mode tops out at 4K 30. If you want 60 FPS, then you have to drop down to 1080p. And this can shoot in HDR, but that is limited to just 1080 30. But as a budget phone for stills and video, I think it's fine for most everyday cases, and it's good enough to take a quick few snaps and upload them to social media. On the software side, this is going to be more of a me thing coming from an iPhone, but it has been a bit of a challenge finding my way around the OS. As mentioned, this runs Android 14 with a custom UI by Nothing, and while I do like the look of the skin, it fits well with the vibe of the phone, I just have no idea what half these icons are, as I am just not used to it. The icons all just kind of look the same with the black and white theme. In iOS 18, we just got the option to theme match our icons, and that is one of the reasons why I don't use it there either. It just makes everything harder to find. Even switching back to the stock icons, that does make the third-party apps more recognizable, but like, what is going on with the Google apps? These all just look the same to me. Just these colourful shapes that all blend together. There is not a lot of personality to them, in my opinion. Now, I need to talk about file transfers, as I am just so used to the Apple ecosystem where all of my photos and data just sync across devices seamlessly. And I know you can do that here with Google services. I just haven't had a chance to set any of that up yet. But when it came to transferring those photos and videos to the Mac, I thought that I could just plug the phone into the computer and, drag and drop them that way, right? Well, it turns out, no, I just couldn't find any way to move them across. I tried image capture on the Mac, which normally lets you import photos and videos from phones or cameras. That didn't work. I looked online and some people said that I needed to use a Mac app to transfer them. Tried that, those didn't work either. So I ended up plugging in an SD card with a reader and then transferring everything to that and then plugging that into the Mac, and then I finally got my photos and videos. So I don't know why I couldn't just plug the phone directly in and get them off that way. Like, help me out here. Is this like a Mac Android thing that I don't know about? Like, you can't really look into the file system of an iPhone either without special software. But I always figured that with Android, it would work like an external drive, but yeah, I don't know. So having to figure all of that out did take me by surprise. Now, I mentioned the lackluster built-in speaker, which I don't think is that big of a deal, as personally I like to use earphones anyway. So when I bought the phone, I also got the CMF Buds Pro 2. And these are amazing, they're only $60 and they're fantastic for the price. They come in a colour matched charge case, love these in the orange. They also come in light grey, dark grey and also navy blue. They have a stem design with silicone tips for a snug fit. You get tap gestures like the original AirPods that you can customise. The CMF design language carries through to the case. In fact, it has this smart dial, which I've never seen that on a charge case before. This controls the volume by turning it, and it also works as a button, which again, you can customize in the app. But the most surprising thing is you get active noise cancellation in a pair of earbuds for $60, and it's actually really good. These have 50 decibel ANC, which blocks out around 90% of the sounds around you, so you can focus on your workout or studying or just listening to music. They don't sound as rich or deep as my AirPods Pro 2, but for the price, I really have no complaints. They make a fantastic pair of everyday earbuds. And I'd have never found these if it wasn't for the CMF phone. Just on the whole, this budget phone has been a real pleasant surprise. While it doesn't have like a single standout feature outside of the semi-modularity, it does everything that you need it to do in a good enough way that you can buy it for $200 and be very happy with your purchase. So if you're not interested in a fancy, expensive flagship, or you just need a spare phone for travel or something cheaper for a younger family member, then it's a fantastic deal for the price. It looks great too. I love the industrial design. It makes it look a lot more high-end than it actually is. Nothing's whole philosophy with these CMF products is that they aim to make great design more accessible without compromising on the user experience. And I think for the most part, they've achieved it with this phone. My biggest critique being the lack of NFC for contactless payments. So I'm hoping that that makes it into a second generation. If you want to see more budget tech, I did just post a video with my top tech buys, all for under $100, featuring the Buds Pro 2, love them. Leave a like and subscribe to see more tech videos from me. And let me know if you want to see some more Android content like this. Don't worry, I'm not about to give up my iPhone, but it was fun to dip my toe in and have a bit of a different experience outside of the Apple walled garden. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.